This week's reflection is centred around Matthew 5, verses 27 to 32, where Jesus is speaking about adultery and divorce. Before I start, I would like to ask you for grace as I share a little of my own personal journey in this area with you as we go along. In Matthew 5, verse 27, Jesus starts off with, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose a part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." He then goes on to say, "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Stern words indeed. These verses seem pretty clear, don't they? And I think pretty sobering. For me, they are about as harsh as any verse you can find in the Bible. I had a lot of questions when I read this passage, such as why does adultery and divorce seem to be singled out in such strong terms? For those of us who are divorced and remarried, have we really condemned our new spouse to a lifetime of adultery? We know that adultery and divorce can cause immeasurable hurt and damage to all those involved. There can be shame, guilt, anger, fear, trust issues, and on and on. And we know also that it can rob children of the love and security of a healthy family, causing ongoing issues. At the time of Matthew 5, Jewish husbands could divorce for virtually any reason, and either husband or wife could divorce the other without any consent, just casting their spouse away in effect. Jesus, of course, knew this, and so when he spoke these words, they were a warning against this practice that left spouses abandoned, wives just flippantly cast aside with no means of support, and children being left with a hurtful and damaging legacy. I have had my own experience of divorce and have suffered personally with some of these feelings mentioned just now. In my situation, I was the one to divorce my husband, and I subsequently married Luke. It has been a painful, long journey for myself and my children, and none of us, including Luke, our parents, our previous church even, have been left untouched by it. It wouldn't be right, of course, to go into all the details here, and it may not even be helpful anyway, as everyone's situation is unique and personal to them. And even though God's word may seem to be clear-cut in giving us direction, like Matthew 5, it can still be extremely complicated for those actually in it. Even though the Bible tells us there are times when divorce may be allowed because of, say, adultery, that doesn't mean it should always happen. There are times when couples have stayed together and been beautifully reconciled. But for my situation, that didn't happen. Whilst there didn't seem to be the obvious biblical reasons for seeking a divorce, things were severely damaged in my marriage. I spent years praying and seeking prayer for something to change, asking God to help me to change, for my husband to want to change, to help me accept that my marriage and my life was just difficult, but to try and find contentment in it anyway. I have to admit, I wrestled with God's commands. With a lot of tears and frustration at times, I wrestled over his word, searching for any verse, however small, that would tell me it was okay to put an end to a marriage that seemed damaged beyond repair. I ranted at God with the, "If you loved me, how could you let me carry on through all of this?" And the, "Surely you wanted more for me, didn't you, God?" I pleaded with him to give me strength, as I so wanted to do the right thing and follow his commands, and I despaired when all I heard was silence. I say all this because for me there certainly were no flippant decisions and actions taken. I wanted so much to walk faithfully with God and spend eternity with him. But how could I if I took Matthew 5 seriously? Despite all of that though, those things stayed broken and the damage continued to get worse, to the extent that I felt I just could not carry on. It was only then that I made the decision to go ahead with the divorce. Through this journey, I've come to realise a lot. God puts relationships high on his agenda, especially the marriage relationship. He also places great importance on commitment, and that is why he talks about adultery and divorce the way he does. He also desires for us to be in relationship with him even during the times of desperation, hurt and sin. He is a God of love and compassion above all else, and desperately wants us to experience that. I wonder what grieved Jesus more, the fact that I divorced, or the fact that I felt shame and condemnation and therefore couldn't feel his compassion, the fact that I wasn't strong enough to keep going, or that we were in a marriage that was damaging each other and our children. The fact that so many people, including myself, were concerned more with the literal words spoken about divorce than why God spoke about them in the first place. I really loved the part in Clive's talk on the Ten Commandments recently, where he was speaking about the you shall not, being perhaps less of a you must not do this type order with a huge stick, but more of a this shouldn't really happen within a covenant relationship. It shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does. We sin, we mess up, and often hurt others in the process, sometimes without thought, sometimes despite it. I took and still do take great solace in the story of the woman about to be stoned for adultery in John 8, verses 4 to 11. It's a beautiful story of Jesus' mercy, not ignoring and dismissing those verses spoken in Matthew 5, but showing compassion despite them. As you may know, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought Jesus a woman caught in adultery who, under the law, should have been stoned to death. But Jesus said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." They couldn't, and so walked away, leaving the woman and Jesus alone together. The story ends with Jesus saying to the woman, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." I'm always humbled by this, and it is this story that brought me hope in some dark times. Regardless of what this woman had done, what sin she had committed, it would not stop her knowing God's mercy, nor was it an unforgivable one. He didn't judge her, condemn or shame her. He didn't say, "Well, you really shouldn't have done that," or "You really blew it this time, girl." Instead, he said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and leave your life of sin." His forgiveness wasn't flippantly given, and I'm assuming it wasn't flippantly received either. I actually think she would have cried with relief as the weight of the shame and condemnation were removed from her by his forgiveness. How many instances have we seen in the Bible where Jesus has just loved sinners with this same amazing compassion, where lives have been changed because of his forgiveness? And he's the same with us. He doesn't want us living in shame, and that applies equally to whether it's something we ourselves have done or because of something done to us. He loves us so much with so much compassion and wants us to be free from shame. He shows us in these illustrations that he is more interested in our present and future than he is in our past. For me, now, I have come to the place where I no longer feel shame and condemnation, but there are still days where I have to pray through guilt. There were and are still consequences to decisions I made all those years ago, not just affecting me, but those I love. There have been heartache, but forgiveness. There has been damage which only God's miraculous healing can mend. But I see God's blessing too. In my marriage and relationship with Luke, he really does deserve a medal. With mine and Luke's relationship with the girls, and with their relationship with their dad. Divorce may not have been God's best for me or my family, even though on the face of it we couldn't have continued. But God has journeyed with me in it and through it. And above all, I see the blessing of being forgiven by God, of being able to walk with him in relationship and knowing that he has compassion and love for me. Jesus wants us to receive healing and forgiveness from our past, but he doesn't want any of us to stay there. Just as in the story of the woman caught in adultery, He addresses us in our present and points us towards the future. What an awesome God he is. This Sunday is Valentine's Day, and Patrick will explore the passage and talk about loving God's way. He will speak to those who are divorced, who are struggling in their marriages and are children of broken marriages. He will also discuss other ways marriage faithfulness can be broken, including abuse. And at the end, all are invited to receive Jesus' compassion, grace and forgiveness during the ministry time. Thank you.